It all started with a laugh. A comment I thought would just hang in the air for a moment. I had been at the conference for hours, quietly observing the deal-making, the subtle power plays, and the well-dressed professionals who surrounded me. But when I heard the words, I felt a chill ripple through the room. The CEO of the tech company, Avery Marshall, walked by, his suit immaculate, his posture perfect, the very picture of a man who had everything under control. That is, until Robert Langley, the senior VP from the other side of the table, muttered something under his breath about Marshall's appearance. "He looks like he's dressing up for a high school prom," Langley said, loud enough for me to hear. It was the way he sneered, the way his voice dropped into that mocking tone that got under my skin. There was nothing subtle about his delivery, he made sure everyone around him could hear it. I could feel the awkwardness in the air as people shifted in their seats, trying to ignore the comment. But I didn't. I looked over at Avery, trying to gauge his reaction. His face remained impassive, calm, collected. The suit, the clean-shaven face, everything about him screamed control. I figured he'd ignore it, that's what most people did in these situations, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Avery stood there for a moment, looking out at the room. Then, without a word, he turned and left. The doors swung shut behind him, and the conversation immediately shifted. Langley, of course, played it off as a joke, but the damage had been done. I could feel the tension building beneath the surface, but I had no idea just how deep it ran. The next 24 hours would change everything. The first sign that something was off came in the early hours the next morning. My phone buzzed with a notification, one I nearly dismissed as another random update. But when I saw the name, I couldn't ignore it. It was a message from my contact at the investment firm, Thomas Kane. The subject line read, "Urgent, $1.5 billion acquisition in jeopardy." I clicked the message open, my stomach sinking. "You might want to check your sources." Last night, Avery Marshall pulled the plug on the deal with Langley's group. The tech acquisition we've been working on. It's off. No explanation, no warning. He's walking away. The message felt surreal. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't missing something, but no. Avery Marshall had just walked away from a $1.5 billion deal without even a courtesy call. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. I hadn't heard anything official yet, but it wasn't like him to make rash decisions. I immediately called Thomas. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight. "Did you hear what happened?" he asked, the frustration clear in his tone. "Marshall's team just pulled out, right in the middle of everything. No warning. Langley's group is in chaos. And worse. Marshall isn't returning calls. His people won't even give us a reason why." I felt a surge of disbelief. Was this really happening? Had Langley's casual comment about Marshall's appearance been the spark? It didn't make sense. How could something so small, so insignificant, have such drastic consequences? "I'm telling you, something's wrong," Thomas continued. "I don't know what went down between them, but Avery's actions are beyond unpredictable now. The deal is as good as dead." I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. Robert Langley's words had meant nothing when he'd said them, but the consequences were becoming painfully clear. Avery Marshall had made his point in the only way that truly mattered. And with that, I knew, the $1.5 billion deal was gone. The hours that followed were a blur. News of the deal's collapse spread like wildfire, hitting the business world with a shockwave. Langley's team scrambled, trying to piece together a reason for what had happened, but no one could give them a clear answer. There was speculation, whispers about power struggles, and even talk of some internal conflict I couldn't quite piece together. But the one thing that remained clear was that no one had expected this. I couldn't shake the feeling that the comment Langley made about Avery's appearance had triggered this. It seemed so petty, so small in the grand scheme of a deal that was worth billions, but it had set something off in Avery that no one saw coming. I tried reaching out to his team. I left message after message, hoping for a response, but there was nothing. His office remained unreachable, his assistants tight-lipped. Then came the official statement, or rather, the lack of one. The press release that went out to the media was a non-explanation. After careful consideration, Avery Marshall and his team have decided to pull out of the acquisition. No further comments at this time. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. It felt deliberate. And then, I remembered the conversation from the night before. Langley's smug grin, the way he had openly mocked Avery without a second thought. Had it really been a simple mistake? I couldn't stop thinking about it, replaying the moment over and over in my head. Langley had insulted Avery publicly, and it seemed as though Avery had decided that if they didn't respect him, there would be no deal. No second chances. But why? What was it about that particular insult that had pushed Avery to take such drastic action? I'd worked in this industry long enough to know that appearances mattered, but I never imagined something so trivial could unravel a deal like this. And yet, here we were. By the time the day was ending, the magnitude of the situation was hitting me fully. The deal was over. And Avery Marshall, the calm, calculating CEO who had walked away from billions, was still a mystery. The day after the announcement, I found myself in an unfamiliar position. I was used to watching deals go through, to seeing complex negotiations play out with smooth precision. But this was a different kind of mess. The kind that left you with more questions than answers. I decided to reach out to someone who might have the answers I was looking for. It was a long shot, but I called Lisa Morris, one of Avery's senior advisors. She'd always been tight with him, and if anyone knew what was really going on, it would be her. She answered the phone on the second ring, her voice weary. "Lisa, it's me. I need to understand something. What happened with the deal? I'm hearing rumors, but nothing adds up." There was a long pause before she responded, her tone lower now, almost conspiratorial. "It's not just about the deal, you know. It's more than that. Avery's not just walking away from money. This is personal." I furrowed my brow, trying to make sense of her cryptic response. "Personal? I don't follow." Langley's insult wasn't the only thing. He's been pushing Avery in ways you wouldn't believe. Underestimating him, undermining him at every turn. This wasn't just one-off commentary, it was a pattern. A subtle, constant dismissal of everything Avery's built, everything he's worked for. And then, last night, it all boiled over. I leaned forward in my chair, my mind racing. So, this isn't just business. Avery didn't walk away because of the deal itself. "No," Lisa said, her voice tight with frustration. "It's about respect. Avery can handle a lot of things. He can handle tough negotiations, even personal attacks, but when you undermine him in front of his team and the people who matter, it's different." And Langley did that. Over and over. I sat back, absorbing the weight of what she was saying. Langley had been testing Avery for months, taking jabs, making sly remarks, pushing him to the brink. And in one careless moment, it all came crashing down. Avery's not going to let anyone dictate his worth. Especially not someone like Langley, Lisa continued, her voice steady but filled with a hint of admiration for her boss. He'll walk away from billions before he lets someone humiliate him. I let out a slow breath, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The acquisition wasn't just a business move, it was about power, about respect, and Avery had drawn his line in the sand. He wasn't going to let Langley or anyone else take him for granted. "And the deal?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "It's gone. And I don't think Avery regrets it." The call ended, and I sat there in the quiet of my office, processing the information. I could almost feel the tension that had built up between them, the simmering resentment that no one saw, but that had been building for months. It was a reminder of just how fragile these high-stakes business deals really were. One wrong move, one offhand comment, and everything could unravel in an instant. The next few days were filled with the fallout. The business world, especially the tech sector, was abuzz with rumors, speculation, and a whole lot of disbelief. How could a $1.5 billion deal dissolve so quickly? How could something as trivial as a comment about a CEO's appearance cause such a seismic shift? I watched as Langley tried to play damage control. He issued a public statement, claiming that the collapse of the deal was an unfortunate but necessary decision, and that he wished Avery Marshall all the best in his future endeavors. But there was no apology, no acknowledgement of what had truly happened. It was all PR spin, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, Avery Marshall remained silent. His team was tight-lipped, his staff barely responding to inquiries. He disappeared from the public eye, but his reputation had grown even stronger in the wake of the debacle. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of admiration for him. Avery had built a reputation of being calculated, unflappable, someone who always stayed in control, no matter the situation. But now, he had shown a different side. A side that said, I don't need this deal. I don't need anyone who doesn't respect me. It was a bold move, and it sent ripples throughout the industry. Everyone was talking about it. The media picked up the story, framing it as a cautionary tale about the price of disrespect in the corporate world. One insult, one careless remark, and a multi-billion-dollar acquisition evaporated in a matter of hours. But there was a part of me that couldn't shake the thought, was this really about a single comment? Was Langley's insult really the catalyst for the collapse, or was there something deeper at play? I couldn't stop thinking about Avery's silence. The way he didn't retaliate right away, how he let the moment linger, only to pull the rug out from under everyone later. It wasn't a reaction, it was a calculated decision. As the days went by, I realized that this story was far from over. Avery wasn't going to let anyone forget this. He had made his point clear, and I had a feeling that Langley, the one who thought he was in control, was now the one who would be left picking up the pieces. The following week, Avery's absence from the media became a talking point in itself. For a man known for his strategic silence, this was a new level of control. People began to speculate that he wasn't just withdrawing from a deal, he was withdrawing from a system. A system that valued money over integrity, appearance over respect. As the tension in the air thickened, I received a call that changed everything. It was from Lisa Morris again. Avery wants to meet, she said, her voice unusually tense. He's asked for you specifically. I was taken aback. Avery had never been one to personally involve others in his decisions, let alone someone like me, who wasn't part of his immediate inner circle. But I knew this could be the chance to understand what was really going on. I agreed immediately. A few hours later, I found myself in one of the most high-end restaurants in the city, a quiet, dimly lit place that had been chosen for its discretion. I was led to a private room in the back. There, sitting across from me, was Avery Marshall. He hadn't changed, still impeccably dressed, still exuding the quiet authority that made him the kind of person who walked into a room and instantly commanded attention. Sit down, he said simply, his eyes meeting mine without hesitation. I took a seat, unsure of what to expect. For a man who had the power to make and break billion-dollar deals, I expected a grand explanation, perhaps some justification for the move. Instead, he sat back, his hands clasped in front of him, his gaze unwavering. I want you to understand something, Avery began, his voice calm but intense. I've spent my career building something. Not just a company, something that represents my values, my vision. I've had people doubt me, undermine me, mock me. Langley was just the last in a long line of those who think they can get away with it. He paused, his fingers tapping the edge of the table thoughtfully. This deal was never about money for me, he continued, but about aligning with people who understood what I was trying to build. Langley, he didn't see that. He never saw me as an equal. And when he belittled me, when he mocked me, it wasn't just an insult, it was an attack on everything I've worked for. I nodded, finally beginning to grasp the full weight of the situation. Avery had been playing a long game, one that involved more than just closing deals. It was about protecting his integrity, his reputation. The $1.5 billion acquisition had been a means to an end, but the moment Langley had crossed that line, Avery had made his decision. "I made a point," Avery said, leaning forward slightly, his voice lower now. "I'm not here to be disrespected. And I'm not going to let anyone think they can undermine me and get away with it." I sat back in my chair, the realization hitting me hard. Avery wasn't just protecting his image, he was redefining what it meant to be a leader in a world that often put profits before principles. He had given up billions to make a statement. And the future of the company? I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. He smiled faintly. "The right people will come. The right partners will understand. They'll know what I stand for." As I left that meeting, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of respect. Avery Marshall had sacrificed a fortune to teach the world that some things were more valuable than money. It wasn't just about a deal, it was about dignity, and Avery had shown just how far he was willing to go to defend it. The deal may have been gone, but Avery Marshall had emerged victorious. The weeks that followed were quieter than expected, almost eerily so. The business world had moved on, or at least, it appeared to. But beneath the surface, things had shifted. The deal was gone, yes, but so was something else, a notion that had once held sway in corporate circles, the idea that power, control, and respect could be bought and sold like commodities. Avery Marshall had made it clear that his principles, his integrity, weren't for sale. And as I moved through the days, attending meetings and catching up on the aftermath of the acquisition collapse, I began to see the ripple effects of what Avery had done. It wasn't just about Langley's humiliation anymore. It was about a shift in the air, a subtle but undeniable change in the way people conducted themselves in the business world. Suddenly, those who had been known for their ruthless tactics, their sharp elbows, began to question if their approach was still valid. I started hearing whispers about executives and CEOs who were beginning to rethink their strategies. Some, who had once placed profits above all else, were now asking, what would Avery do? Some wondered if his move had been reckless, but I could tell there was a growing respect for it. I was in a meeting one afternoon when the subject of Avery came up. The conversation had nothing to do with the deal, nothing to do with business at first. But as it often happens in these rooms, the topic inevitably turned to him. "You heard what happened with Avery Marshall?" one of my colleagues asked, his voice tinged with both awe and disbelief. I nodded, already knowing what he was about to say. But he didn't stop. He walked away from a $1.5 billion deal like it was pocket change. Not because he couldn't afford it. Not because the numbers didn't work. But because Langley insulted him. And now people are starting to see what's at stake when you cross someone like that. I could feel the tension in the room rise. There was no longer just quiet admiration for Avery's boldness, it was reverence. The story of the deal's collapse had become a cautionary tale, but it wasn't just about respect anymore. It was about the very foundation of how business was done. A few days later, I met with a few old colleagues from the investment firm. Over drinks, one of them mentioned a major development that seemed to come out of nowhere. Avery's quietly approached a few new investors. Big ones. And they're willing to put up the capital, no questions asked. I raised an eyebrow. Are you serious? Oh, absolutely. He's building something new. He's got a vision, and now people see it. And, believe me, they're lining up to be part of it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Avery, the man who had walked away from billions, was now poised to rebuild something even bigger. As it turned out, Langley's comment about Avery's appearance hadn't just triggered the end of a deal, it had sparked a revolution. Avery was setting the stage for something that would shift the entire industry once more. He wasn't just bouncing back, he was forging a new path, one that would be built on his own terms, with people who shared his values. And as for Langley, the last I heard, his reputation had taken a significant hit. He was still trying to pick up the pieces of his fractured relationships, both within his company and across the industry. People had started to see him for what he truly was, someone who underestimated others to secure his own power. But as I walked away from that last conversation, one thing became crystal clear: Avery Marshall had shown the world that real power wasn't just about making deals, it was about knowing your worth, setting boundaries, and never compromising on your principles. And in doing so, he had not only redefined his future but the future of business itself. Months passed, and the world began to fully grasp the magnitude of what had happened. Avery Marshall had quietly emerged from the storm of that $1.5 billion acquisition collapse, not just unscathed, but stronger than ever. The narrative had shifted from one of financial loss to one of bold leadership and unwavering principles. Avery had made a statement that rippled through every corner of the business world: success wasn't measured by the size of the deal, but by the integrity behind it. His new venture, the one he had started building after pulling out of the acquisition, was quickly gaining traction. It wasn't just about technology, it was about culture, about creating a space where respect, innovation, and ethics would drive every decision. Investors were eager to get in on the ground floor, seeing not just a return on investment, but the chance to be part of something truly groundbreaking. In the following months, I had the opportunity to speak to several individuals involved in his new venture. Every single one of them spoke about Avery with a mix of admiration and awe, but most importantly, there was a sense of loyalty to him, something that was rare in the cutthroat world of business. He had built a network of people who believed in his vision, who trusted him not only as a leader but as a person. Langley, on the other hand, had become a cautionary tale. His attempt to belittle someone like Avery Marshall had left a permanent scar on his reputation. His company, which had once seemed poised for greatness, began to lose key partnerships. Investors pulled back, unwilling to align with someone who had proven himself incapable of respecting those around him. The tech world moved on, but the impact of Avery's decision lingered. CEOs and executives who had once thought they could manipulate others for their own gain were now rethinking their approach. More and more companies began prioritizing respect and integrity over short-term profits, and the business environment slowly started to change. As for me, I couldn't shake the memory of that final conversation with Avery in the restaurant. I had learned something that day, something that stayed with me long after the deal had collapsed. Avery hadn't just walked away from money, he had walked away from the people who underestimated him. And in doing so, he had redefined what it meant to be a true leader. The deal was gone. But what had come in its place was something far more valuable. Avery had shown that true power wasn't about the size of the deal, the wealth you amassed, or the people you could push around. It was about staying true to yourself, never compromising your values, and knowing when to walk away. And in the end, it was that unwavering conviction that made Avery Marshall's success the one that no one could ignore.